Good. Okay. Okay. So hello, everyone. Those who are present in our seminar room and those on Zoom. It's a pleasure to host Professor Yoshihiko Wada from the Department of Economics at Doshisha University in Kyoto. Professor Wada will introduce himself, but I'd like to thank him for agreeing to speak to us. I know he's busy traveling and teaching at the moment. And I'd also like to thank Professor Ada Hagar Cohen, thanks to whom we have this exchange of lectures with Doshisha University. Ada was the director of CISMOR, the Center for Interdisciplinary Study of the Monotheistic Religions at Doshisha University. And it's very fitting that such a center in our center, the Center for the Study of Religious Conversion and Interreligious Encounters, have encounters between the two centers, and this is not the first such exchange. Last year, we enjoyed an excellent lecture by one of your members, by Dr. Kanan Kitani, who joined our seminar on center and periphery. This year, it's religion and natural environment. Last year was center and periphery in the Abrahamic religions. And we had Dr. Kitani on Zoom about the changing faces of the Christians in Japan. So now we are ready for another lecture from Doshisha professor. Professor Wada, please, and welcome. Just a minute, we can.
Oh, thank you very much for, can you hear me? Okay, no problem. Yes, okay. Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me such a wonderful opportunity to speak with you and discuss with you and on the very important issue on the environment and religion. Let me first share my slide with you. So today I would like to talk on the Shozo Tanaka's nonviolent anti-pollution ecological movement and its influence from Christian teachings. But I would like to also talk about the if there is any influence placed onto Japanese society from his movement. And so anyway, so and I'd like to I'm from the Department Faculty of Economics, and my major is ecological economics. So somehow I'm suitable for this topic, but I'm not a theologian or I'm not a religious studies specialist, but I'm involved in the Center for Study of Conscience, and so I'm also thinking about philosophy and ethical issues of economy and other things which is something related to environmental issues. And also I'm a director of the Doshisha's EU campus, which is placed at on the campus of University of Tübingen in Germany. So I occasionally visit the campus there, and so well, maybe I get to see you sometime somewhere in Europe or in the vicinity areas. Okay, let me so I talk about myself briefly. My hometown is Nagasaka, Nagano, and our high school has produced some famous person. Is a musical composer, Joe Saishi. He's a musical composer who produced a lot of pieces for the Studio Ghibli. I hope anyone knows about him. And yeah, also I studied at the Yokohama City University and international relations, and my specialization was international development assistance policy and so on, and sustainable development. And after that, I studied at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and I did my master's and PhD in ecological economics, and my specialization is ecological footprint analysis and the environmental impact of industrialization, nuclear energy, and so on. Okay, and okay, so I spoke about the Center for Conscience. So, well, as you may know, our founder is Joseph Mishima, and she studied at the Amherst College and the Andover Theological Seminary. And she became the first Japanese Protestant clergy at the end of the 19th century, and founded the Doshisha in about 148 years ago. Okay, so let me now focus on the life of Shozo Tanaka, whom I respect so much. So he was a man who guided the movement against pollution cases, especially caused by Ashio copper mine in the 19th century and beyond. And rivers and farmland and along Watarashi River were contaminated by toxicity from the tailings, and farmers and fishers were suffering from the reduction of the pollution and also health damages. So when Shozo became 49 years old, he was elected to be the Diet member. And at that time, the pollution became so intense that he tried hard to stop the pollution, and by stopping the operation of the mining activity as a member of the Diet. However, after 11 years of his battle in the Diet, he found it to be very helpless, because the government did not listen to him, and so he resigned the seat. Then Shozo lived among the folks of Yanaka village, which had been abandoned in order to pool the poisoned water and other large water reservoir. So, so there are two stages of his battle. First, as a Diet member, and the second, non-Diet member. Okay. As you can see, this photo, you can see this this painting. I think this is the Jesus on here, and one of the disciples here. So you can see he Shozo respected and tried to follow what Jesus was doing in his daily life, and in the context of the movement against the pollution. And so I'd like to just first talk briefly about the Ashio copper mine pollution case, and my talk is based on this seminary book on industrial pollution in Japan, edited by Jun Ui, who was a very prominent researcher on environmental pollution cases. And so this is the this map of the area, and the Ashio copper mine is just nearby the Nikko, which is a very famous tourist attraction. And also the Watarashi River flows from that mine sites and goes down to Gunma and nearby the border of the Tochigi and Gunma prefecture and flows into the Tone River. Okay, so this is the geography of the place. And so let me talk about the Asia copper mine. So in 1864, background of this problem. In 1864, newly established Meiji government was to set its first national priority and had a policy of modernization and of the country by increasing the military strength and expanding in the industrial production. Copper was considered to be very important because it was able to bring in foreign currency. So copper earned about 9.5% of the Japan's export earnings in 1890. And also silk was also a very important export good. And my hometown was one of the main producers of the silk products. So copper played an important role in the process of Japan's capitalization and militarization. And Ashio copper mine was one of the main copper producers in Japan. So copper at the upper part of the Watanabe River, copper mining operation began in early 1600s. That is the beginning of the Edo period. The mineral resources seem to have been exhausted in the latter half of the 1800s, but in 1877, Mr. Ichibei Furukawa, he's originally from the Kyoto area, purchased the Ashio mine from Meiji government. And he introduced the Western modern mining technologies. And so in 1884, he and his company discovered promising copper deposit. So let me just briefly show this table. And so this shows the what percentage of the copper was exported from Japan. So sometimes 100%, but usually 70% or 80% of the copper has been exported to foreign countries to earn the foreign currencies. Okay, so since the discovery of the promising deposit in 1884, environmental pollution became extremely serious, and fish and Watanabe River died in mass volume, and production of rice and other products, crops dropped drastically. And so these are due to the contaminated water flowing from mining sites and tailing dams, and which contain the acidity and heavy metals. And also deforestation was a very serious problem too. This was due to the acid rain and as well as the clear cutting for timber production for tunnels and the dormitories of the workers and so on. So this was taken in the 2000 or so and by Mr. Izumi. And so this refinery, large-scale refinery or smelter, is already demolished. But so this shows what the vegetation was like in 2000. And in fact, toward the end of the operation, the scenery was like this. It was 44 years ago. And so some people said this is the Grand Canyon of Japan or something like that. So no vegetation. And actually, there was one village on the side of this picture. But all the people had to be relocated because of the contamination. So now the vegetation has recovered to some extent. So this was taken 9 years ago. And so this recovery can be seen. And well, this is not the natural phenomenon, but many people come to do the tree planting as volunteer, or sometimes the companies pay, or the city government pays for it. And all right, and so this is one of the tailing stamps, which contains a lot of toxic and heavy metals within the dam. Okay, so I just want, well, as I said, there are two different phases of his movement against pollution. Actually, the total of his activities was 23 years old, 23 years. And the first phase was the first 11 years. He was 49 until 60 years old, and as a Diet member, he used the Constitution as a weapon or the justification of his argument. And then second phase was the latter 12 years, and so he resigned and he tried to work outside the Diet. Right? And so he tried to, he failed, but he attempted to give a personal letter directly to the Meiji Emperor in 1901. And 3 years later, he moved into the Tanaka village to live together with the villagers, and they reorganized the resistance movement against the government's plan to construct a water reservoir in this village. He passed away in 1913. Okay, so first phase. Okay, so in 1890, a big flood took place in the area, and a large area of farmland and villages were affected, and the production of the agriculture dropped drastically. So anti-pollution movement was activated, and at that time, of course, incidentally, Shozo became the Diet member of the Diet and parliamentarian. And so at the second session of the Diet, he raised this issue, and he criticized the Furukawa Kogyo Company and the Japanese government as well for their irresponsible response and conduct. But nothing changed. And then the second large flood took place in 1896. Even larger area has been flooded and damaged. And the loss, economic loss, was 23 million yen, which is equivalent of 8 times annual income of Ashikopa mine. So it's a huge loss for the farmers and fishers and residents nearby. In 1897, Shozo, again in the Diet, insisted that Ashikopa mine should stop operation. However, the government allowed Furukawa company to continue its operation. And so Furukawa built an inefficient retention pond, which had no effect in mitigating the contamination. So just a gesture only. In 1901, Shozo gave up with the Diet, and so he resigned from the Diet, and he attempted to give a personal letter to the Meiji Emperor to testify that the government is not doing a proper job. His attempt failed, and he was arrested and released soon after. In fact, his attempt was very risky because there had been similar cases before, in which main figures of this protest, the approaching to the national leader were sentenced to death, especially during the Edo period. Well, in fact, a journalist from a Mainichi newspaper assisted to this attempt, and he was capable of raising awareness to the nationwide leaders in terms of the significance of Shozo's movement. So the government was a bit afraid that the public opinion may be against him, the government. So he was released in 1 or 2 days. Okay, so and so his life was saved thanks to this newspaper journalist. So 2 years later, government announced that plan to construct a water retention pond, which meant that the Yanaka village, the most severely impacted village, which had a population of 2,500 or so, was going to be underwater when flood occurs, and village, that meant that the village will be demolished and the villagers will have to be forced to be evacuated and relocated to other parts of Japan. So the following year, he was so upset and he felt this was unfair and unjust. So he moved into the village, leaving family behind, and he divorced his wife, Katsu. Well, he loved her, but just he didn't want to to protect her. So he officially or formally did divorce with her. Okay. So he tried to revitalize the protest movement with and this shows the photo shows the poor houses of the villagers. Actually, the more than 100, nearly 200 households were relocated, but 19 households decided to remain in the land. However, government used excess force, and between 1906 and 7, the government demolished all the villages and destroyed all the houses, and the water retention pond was constructed finally. And the Yanaka villagers were relocated to many parts of Japan, including Hokkaido, and they suffered a lot due to different living environment and due to severe weather conditions, especially in Hokkaido. So this is the current view of the Waterless River water retention reservoir, and so you can go there and you can see some remaining of the ancestral graveyard and the foundation of the buildings of village government and so on. Okay. So discussion. So I would like to share with you the thoughts on what were the sources of energy behind Shozo's conviction, commitment, and dedication for saving the victims. And the second, what influence did Shozo's place on Japanese society and beyond? So first, so I'd like to talk about the influence from Christian teachings onto his behaviors and commitment. And so, well, Shozo actually did not become a Christian formally. Well, even he didn't like some of the organized religion, the churches, because he thought, oh, they only seek for salvation, spiritual salvation of themselves. And he didn't like some negative attitude or the very attitude of these followers who didn't collaborate with him in his movement. However, he was profoundly influenced by Christian teachings and Bibles. And in fact, he obtained energy from Christian philosophy for the movement of this saving the victimized resident. Actually, some researchers said the Bible was his guidebook and compasses, and also the fight for the Yanaka villagers was the actualization or the realization of teachings of Bible for him. Professor Hayashi noted that. And his behavior or the philosophy or attitude or the faith changed gradually. First, he tried to help from above, but he realized that seemingly ignorant and seemingly powerless villagers are the most powerful ones. And it was for him paradoxically. And he even said, look, the God resides in Yanaka, and Bible resides within the body of Yanaka villagers, Yanaka people. And that this phrase was written on his diary at the age of 69, 3 years before his passing away. So, and for him, Yanaka village became the place where he meets with the God. And I just want to show the process, how he encountered the Christian thinking and philosophy. So he was the son of Nanushi, or village head, and his father died when he was very young, but he succeeded his position before he became 20 years old. But anyway, and at the age of 30 years old, in 1870s, Shozo became a civil servant in Esashi Prefecture, which is maybe 100 kilometers north of his hometown, or maybe even farther than that. And in the following year, unfortunately, he was arrested and put into jail for committing murder of his boss. Later, he found to be innocent, so another person did the killing. But anyway, he had to stay in jail for 3 years almost. And during the first year, the condition was so severe and terrible, and he had not enough food, not enough heating and clothes, and he survived only because his inmate passed away due to disease, and the clothes was given to him. And however, 1 year later, the condition in jail was drastically improved, and because of the newly installed prison law in 1872. So which imitated the prison law of the West. And he was impressed and surprised and impressed by this law, and became very interested in Western philosophy and religions beyond the law, behind the law. Especially he was impressed by the principle that is even sinners or prisoners should be treated and respected as a human with dignity. At that time, he was not given the Bible, but later he was presented the Bible, so he started to study the Christian philosophy from that. And actually, so this is the one. Shozo was put into jail for 4 times in his lifetime. So in 1902, he was also, again jailed and stayed there for 40 days or so for some insulting the officials. So, yeah, it's a very minor thing. Anyway, so he was given a booklet of the Gospel of Matthew, and he read it with excitement in the jail. And so those supporters in the movement were mainly socialists, and at the same time, most of them were also Christians. And so Shozo began to communicate and associate with the Christian leaders, such as Osui Arai, and he's was from Swedenborgian tradition. He stayed in California for nearly 30 years in a Christian community, and he went back to Japan afterwards. And so he met with Shozo Tanaka. In fact, Osui was impressed by the news that Shozo attempted to give a letter to Meiji Emperor. So he, Osui wrote a warm letter to Shozo, and they met each other soon after, and so they became friends. And also the second person, a very important person, Kanzo Uchimura, he is a leader of non-church movement in Japan. And and also Gunpei Yamamuro was another supporter, and he was the leader of Salvation Army in Japan, the Japanese branch. So it is obvious that Shozo learned a lot from these leaders. And okay, so the influence was profound, I would say. Okay, so the second feature of his living motto and philosophy is material simplicity. He used all his personal financial assets to organize the protest and resistance movement against mining poisoning. At his deathbed, he possessed only several items such as the uncompleted manuscript of some kind of book chapter, a New Testament of the Bible, and 3 stones, a tissue paper, and 3 diaries, and very strange, but the combined booklet of the Japanese Constitution, Meiji Constitution, and the Gospel of Matthew, which was presented to him in 1902 when he was in jail. Well, so this lifestyle is very similar to what Mahatma Gandhi was. He left very small belongings behind when he passed away also. Okay, so the third feature of his motto and philosophy was his pacifism, his non-violent movement for social change. He wanted to change the society, improve the society, but he didn't dare to depend on the violence or the forces. So, and actually, he even insisted, called for total and worldwide disarmament, and instead he insisted that all the military expenditures should be switched to fund for and finance the exchange of diplomats and students, and they can create world peace, he said. And well, this thinking is now being embodied in the Constitution of Japan. The Article 9 and others said that the solution for the international conflict should not be dependent on arms. Also, now I'll show you now. Well, I think this pacifist attitude is because he was being tortured and victimized by the violence while he was in jail. So that is one motivation that he denied the violence. Okay, so she's considered to be a pioneer of nonviolence ecology movement in the world in a sense, and he's and he also is considered to be a person who practiced Christian motto of loving your neighbors. And well, this is just my theory, but Shozo could very well have had influence on some of the Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela's work. This is just my guess. I was looking for evidences, but I couldn't find so far. All right. So the last point is he not only criticized against the Ashio copper mine, but also he criticized the Japanese government and also the profound civilized modern civilization itself. And he mentioned that if the state harms and kills its people, it destroys the nation itself. So, you know, it's killing the country itself if government harms and kills the people. And so he even said, this is very famous phrase by him, and true civilization will not damage mountains and rivers and will not destroy communities and will not kill people. And so, this phrase is a very well known. So I think I always talk about this phrase to my students when I talk about Shozo Tanaka and his pacifist and environmental movement. Okay, so the second question of for discussion topic is whether Shozo Tanaka has influenced the Japanese society and beyond. So, in fact, you know, his goal was not accomplished because the Yanaka village was demolished. The people there had to be relocated, and so it seems that his effort was in vain. But in fact, it was not, because his philosophy and conscience were succeeded by his disciples, and his disciples became community leaders in many parts of Japan, and they practiced the action of loving neighbors and for protecting human rights and natural environment and health of the local people, and protecting the self-determination of the local people. So actually, because Shozo became very well known nationwide, many university students gathered to assist him, especially after his failed attempt of giving the personal letter to the Meiji emperor. And for example, there are some good examples, and Sumitomo's Beshi copper mine in Ehime Prefecture in Shikoku, and also the Hitachi mining in Ibaraki Prefecture. In both mining sites, efficient pollution prevention technologies and schemes have been in place because the community demanded it. And the leaders for these movements were those followers and disciples. So, and they aimed to become like a Shozo, and so there are many Shozo in many parts of Japan. So mining companies were so forced to internalize the externalities because of these pressures from local people. And another good example of the followers and disciples is Torizo Kurosawa. Mr. Torizo Kurosawa dedicated and was the most dedicated and the most trusted disciple of Shozo Tanaka. And he served for Tanaka for 4 years. And I think he was a university student or like 20 years old and so on. And so he, Torizo, after the Shozo passed away, studied the daily farming practices of Denmark and established Rakuno Gakuen University and affiliated high schools and in Hokkaido. And also he established farmers cooperatives, Hokkaido Dairy Product Cooperatives Alliance, and later this became the Son of Land. And so main purpose of this project was to facilitate farmers' self-determination and economic independence and self-sufficiency and so on. So, and the motto of Rakuno Gakuen University and the affiliated schools is three love. Love for God and love for people and love for the earth. So, and another motto was the healthy earth ensures healthy human health. So I think the first one was from the Grundtvigs philosophy from Denmark. All right, and so and also Kenneth Strong book. This Ox Against the Storm is very influential book. It was published in 1977 and translated into many different languages. In Japanese, translation was published in 10 years later. No, 1 year after. Okay, another evidence that Shozo Tanaka have influenced Japanese society is this group of people, which is called the Kumatori 6 rebellious researchers, and Kyoto University's nuclear reactor laboratory in Kumatori township of Osaka. And the central, well, 6 researchers, one person already have died at when this was taken. And Mr. Hiroaki Koide is the one of the main figures in this group, and he and his group was able to educate Japanese citizens and in terms of the risks and dangers of nuclear energy. And especially Mr. Hiroaki Koide was capable of conveying a message that the biggest problem of nuclear energy is not the technical one or the safety issues, but ethical one. And this, because the technology is necessarily dependent on discrimination of people. So this operation of this energy, the machinery requires discriminated people who were forced to go into very radioactive parts of the reactors, and so there is a very ethical problem for this technology, and the dependent on this technology is very ethically, morally problematic. And I think this philosophy, I visited his laboratory, and his in his room, the photo of Shozo Tanaka, much larger than this, was placed, and the Koide is one of the followers of Shozo Tanaka, and the Japanese citizens learned a lot from these people, what to do and what are the things that involves the use of nuclear energy. Okay, so I would like to conclude. Well, okay, so sorry, and also as I said, the Shozo Tanaka's attempt to deliver his personal letter to the Meiji Emperor was not successful, but fortunately, the great-grandson of Meiji Emperor, the Heisei Emperor, and his wife, Empress, visited Sano City Museum in 2014, and they carefully read the original copy of the Shozo's letter to Meiji Emperor. So his dream was fulfilled 113 years after his attempt. And so this was very emotionally moving incident, and I appreciate what the Heisei Emperor did and respected, and the philosophy of Shozo Tanaka's movement. And this visit gave a lot of publicity, and so the Japanese people got to know what Shozo Tanaka had to say, and his philosophy was well known again through this their visit. And so I think so in conclusion, I would like to say that we can learn a lot from those philosophy and behaviors and living mottos, and so his conduct, philosophy was heavily, profoundly influenced from Christian teachings, and his faith evolved gradually from the beginning to the end, and his pacifism and materialistic simplicity and criticism against the modern civilization, especially the infringement of human rights in the name of industrialization, is well taken and should be well taken. And also his strong influence, he has placed a very strong influence onto Japanese society and beyond, especially when the Japanese citizens faced with the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant incident, we learned a lot from the defect of this civilization, which is dependent on very risky technologies and the dependent on the health risk of the workers working in the nearby the reactors. Thanks to him, we were able to learn this reality. So what happened? What if Shozo did not exist? I think the world and especially Japanese society would have been more savage, more unfriendly place to live, or without loving each other, atmosphere of loving each other. But I'm not sure what would be the society like that. But anyway, I would say that the existence provided a good chance of Japanese society to become more civilized and respecting the human rights. Thank you very much. So sorry, I hope you understand what I had to say, and I hope lively discussion to follow.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was, for me, it was very all new and very interesting and inspirational. I'm sure I have a few questions and a comment, but I'd like our colleagues to speak up first. Let's begin with the people in the room and then the people in the Zoom. Would anyone like to ask or comment? Sam, please.
Hey, thank you very much. Also, I just want to say I'm Sam, who we've been in touch via email for arranging the lecture, so it's good to meet.
You're Sam.
Yes, I'm Sam.
Oh, okay, nice to meet you on, on screen at least.
Yes. I wanted to ask 2 questions. First, thank you for the very interesting lecture. I wanted to ask you, you've first of all pointed to a number of disciples and also other people who were influenced by Shozo Tanaka. I was wondering, were those people also either themselves Christian, or did they acknowledge the Christian influence on their teachers' ideas, or did they just view him as generally representing some sort of Japanese teaching that was not necessarily connected to Christianity? And my second question I wanted to ask was, I'm just curious, if you speak to the average person on the street today in Japan, do they know his name? Have they heard of him? Even though obviously you've shown that his influence is very big, but is his name known?
Thank you very much. Good questions. First, well, the followers, some followers became Christian, but maybe less than half, or maybe smaller portion, because in Japan, the living as a Christian is living as a minority, and so we had some frictions if you become a Christian, because you can try to go to church in the morning of Sunday, and many social events organized on Sundays, and but I think and also the Mr. Koide is not Christian as far as I know, but he respect what Shozo Tanaka was saying and what Shozo Tanaka was doing. And so, and actually, I see similarity between Mr. Koide and Mr. Tanaka. Both are very much compassionate with the persons with disabilities and the people who are minorities and who are suffering from discrimination. And so I see some kind of fragrance coming out from these people, fragrance of Christianity or the Jesus. Yes. And second question is, does ordinary people do ordinary people in Japan know about Shozo Tanaka? Well, I wish they do, but well, my students, I always talk about him, so my students would know, but I don't know, maybe not many, less than half people in Japan, ordinary people in Japan know about him, but because the emperor's visit and his attention, careful reading of the personal letter, written letter, gave some, publicity, and so I think his attempt was well known from their visit, and maybe more than half of the Japanese population know about this attempt itself, but not very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dad, come up, please.
So, first, thank you very much for this introduction of a quite thought-provoking person. I just wonder if there are any opposition for Tanaka's doctrines in these days. And opposition not from the, let's call it ecological or financial even side or aspects, but more on the basis of these spiritual, maybe religious ideas?
I am not sure if there is any opposition against his spiritual side of his philosophy. Well, I think theologian like Kitani may know. Sorry, I cannot answer this question because, sorry, I'm not theologian per se.
No.
But his pacifist philosophy is shared by Tolstoy and also Japanese novelist Tokutomi Roka, and Roka Tokutomi met with Tolstoy in Russia when he visited him, and also the switching all the expenditures to diplomacy and to the scholarship for students is being practiced, for example, by Cuba. Cuba tried to send medical teams to countries suffering from disasters, and Cuba tried to establish its good reputation for being helpful, so that they will be able to keep the independence. And Costa Rica has also abolished national military organization, and they have some police, armed police, but Costa Rica thought, oh, if we have arms, then United States will attack us, or the other countries will attack us. If we get rid of it, maybe that may be safer and national security is improved, but paradoxically. So well, Japanese Constitution, Article 9 also said the same thing, but the reality is that the self-defense forces is there, and the self-defense force of Japan is now is now allowed to help if countries of this alliance, for example, U.S. is attacked, then that it may be considered to be attack to Japan. So the Japanese self-defense force is allowed now by the cabinet resolution, recent resolution, the change of the interpretation by the cabinet resolution that so they may be dispatched to fight against countries which attack the U.S. So that is so the Japanese constitution has become somewhat ineffective in this pacifist philosophy. Anyway, okay. So I'm sorry. I just not answering your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
I think the Japanese government has a very good position to have both two countries who are fighting against each other, Russia and Ukraine, to come together in a table to negotiate for the reconciliation, because Japanese constitution encourages that, and Chinese government trying to do it, and Egypt, Turkish Erdogan is doing that, and why not Japanese Prime Minister Kishida? Good, and Kishida is very now toward aligned toward the U.S. but I think the U.S. is not the neutral, and so I think we should be more neutral and try to facilitate the dialogue, because it is very against the humanistic things that they're killing each other. Only benefits all the arms producers, manufacturers, all that, and nobody gains except these people. And so I think this stupidity should be stopped right away.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that if Shozo Tanaka is alive, he would maybe travel to Ukraine and travel to Russia and try to start the negotiation. Yeah, great. Right.
You're optimistic. Anyone on you? No, I admire your optimism. Anyone on Zoom would like to ask a question or pose a comment? Kana? Or sorry, Kana, did you raise your hand?
First Ada, and then I.
Okay, good.
No. I just wanted to say that Professor Wada, I think, gives some time lectures to high school students, and my daughter in the Doshisha high school of the girls' high school of Doshisha did learn about Tanaka and about his activities. So, and they also went out from the school to to help in the community disabled people. So this, I think, in some way, Tanaka's, how should I say, legacy is still there somewhere, at least in the Doshisha complex, because Dosha is not only university, it's also, it starts from kindergarten and goes to through all the schools and then the university. And we have two universities actually, Women's University and the General University of Dosha. So it's quite a very huge body of education. And I think Tanaka has some legacy over there, at least as far as I could hear about it. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know your daughter was in the class, but okay, I didn't realize.
She told me about this Tanaka and how it's a great personality. So probably your lecture made a lot of impression on her. So this was very nice.
I'm glad you are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah?
I wonder how much Second World War influenced the policy of the Japanese government, and whether without this war, the influence of Tanaka was lesser and less influence. And what do you say?
Oh, sorry. So I may.
No, it's clear that that Japan became peace-oriented because of the World War.
Yes, it in theory, yes, it did.
Second World War, and so I wonder whether without the war, maybe the situation was different, and maybe there was less peacefully oriented people in Japan, and it has nothing to do with the heroes that you just talked about. And
Oh, I see. Well, yeah. Without the defeat of the World War II, Japan would have been more unlivable place. I mean, the democracy was introduced, peace, pacifist constitution was enacted. So we had a huge sacrifice. Not a sacrifice only within us, but also the sacrifice to all the Asian countries and U.S. troops, and all these lives have been lost. And so we our peace, our democracy, our lifestyle dependent heavily on these sacrifices. And so, well, yes, that if Shozo Tanaka was still alive, he would have been able to stop this war. Well, maybe he was assassinated by then, but because at that time, those who in the 20s and 30s, those who stood against and vocally stood against the government was put into jail or tortured and silenced. This fascism was very strong and very unfortunate. And I don't know, I cannot imagine what it would have been if the World War was not there. Sorry, I cannot answer to your question very properly. But it's a good way of thinking about this for the future. Yes. Or maybe company can help.
Yeah, you of course, everyone acknowledges that it changed Japan profoundly.
Yes.
The
Interesting.
war, you mean?
Right. Other questions? So I would like to ask a question and also add a comment, or which is actually a question, but not necessarily to you, Professor Wada, but also to other participants. My question to you is about the current ecological movement or ecological activists in Japan. Does it have the same emphasis on the rights of villagers or the rights of people, or does it have has it changed its orientation and its impetus in other directions? And my comment would be about the very interesting triad you mentioned at the end, God, people, and earth. Right, which reminded me of a similar triad in Hebrew or in Jewish lore, Torat Israel, Am Israel, and Eretz Israel. But the big difference is that the God, people, and earth sounds very universalistic, and yes, and what I've said in Hebrew is very particularistic. It mentions the Bible, like, or perhaps the God of Israel, the people of Israel, and the land of Israel. So I was wondering, and this is really a larger question. I believe without that ecological movements may oscillate between the very universal vision and also a vision that's tied to their particular homeland and defending their particular land from abuse and from pollution. Are those two? Could you see those two orientations also in Japan? Something that's very oriented towards Japan and something that has a wider vision of protecting the earth.
Thank you very much. So your question is twofold. One is there any human rights, and emphasis is now on human rights or environment? Is that your first question?
Yes. Is ecology today supported by this ethical ideas of the rights of the villagers and of people, or does it have a different thrust today?
I see. I see. Well, unfortunately, the environmental movement and the human rights, respect for human rights, somewhat separated in Japan, not at the moment. Well, of course, there are many movements which combine the two. However, I think the NGOs who are trying to improve the human rights of refugee seekers in Japan from other parts of the world, from Myanmar or in Indonesia, so their activities have been activated when the lady from Indonesia passed away because of she was not be able to get proper treatment from medical doctors. just a few years ago, and so an environmental movement or ecological movement is somewhat is being separated from these kind of NGOs, but and some indicators show that the indicators of the awareness of the importance of environmental protection by Japanese population is higher than average in a sense compared to other countries. But on the other hand, the data shows that the awareness of the respect for human rights is somewhat lower compared to the environmental awareness. So I think that has to be combined in Japan. And one internationally speaking, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, which was enacted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. These SDGs, during the process of SDGs, environmental NGOs from environmental movement and NGOs of human rights movements get together and collaborated each other to come up with these 70 goals and 169 targets to make these goals to be more effective in terms of protecting both human rights and both environment together at the same time. The failure of Millennium Development Goals, MDS, was the separation of the two groups. So now the one famous phrase for SDGs is no one left behind. No one should be left behind is one encompassing motto of this SDGs. And that is because the human rights movement people try to insert this philosophy of respecting human rights. Okay, so I think this international trend is new and has become have some influence to the actual in the reality internationally. But the Japanese economic institutions still focus on environmental protection, but forgetting about the human rights. So that's very bad. The one example is that national policy and national the economic Keidanren, the Association of the Economic Federation of Economic Entities, Keidanren, still thinks that the dependent on nuclear power, nuclear energy, is a good way of reducing the CO2s to prevent the global warming. But some of the NGOs are very much against, because this technology necessarily produce suffering of the workers, nearby residents who are exposed to excessive radiation. And without the suffering, this technology cannot be operated. And so anyway, so this, I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, some Christian, Protestant Christians and the Catholics are aware of this defect, and so I think the Christian thinkers try to emphasize this defects of this energy technology. Actually, my church Sunday school teacher was very activist against nuclear energy because she knew that somewhat leukemia cases have increased in the island of between France and UK, British Gandhi Island. That is because of the effluent from the nuclear reprocessing facility in of the LUAG. So she knew that her daughter and the granddaughter may suffer from this technology, and she stood up and she went to the Diet and to testify that this energy may cause a lot of problem to the children's health. So, yeah, I think that this she was the small Tanaka in the sense. Thank you. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you to all participants from home and from our seminar room. Yeah, we really appreciate your time, and thanks very much for presenting something which is so relevant to the seminar we've had during this year, Professor Wada. And I hope this is to be continued, Ada. Yeah, we can discuss that afterwards.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Thanks very
telling me
much.
about the Jewish religion, and I didn't know that the God and people and the earth and land is emphasized in the so this seems to be universal, and
It should be.
Huh?
It should be.
Yes, yes. And so I learned a lot from you, and hopefully we can have further discussion in the future.
Right.
And I wish you the best for all the participants who are very keen on this issue, and wish for the success of this group.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so bye. Thank you.